Okay, a good vach, a good chedesh. We just entered the month of Adar Beis. The Torah says when Adar comes in, we have to increase in joy, to increase in happiness. And it also says that when Adar begins, the Jewish court announces that everyone should prepare to give their coin, their half coin, their half shekel, for the needs of the sacrifices that were brought every day. Everyone had to prepare their gift, and the announcement was given today on the beginning of the month of Adar. So the announcement of the court is everyone should prepare the half coin, and there's also a spiritual meaning to preparing the half coin. Usually in the Torah, there is an emphasis on making things whole, perfect. Everything that's done in Torah has to be done in a perfect way. To have a perfect, the Kohen, the one who offers the sacrifices, has to have his body has to be whole. There can't have any blemishes in his body, and the sacrifice of the animals have to be whole, and the utensils that are used in the temple have to be whole. And here the Torah says, no, you should give a half a coin. And in the very last talk that Rabbi gave, which was on a year like this one, 32 years ago, where Parshas Vayakel was read in the same Shabbos that we read the additional Torah portion about the half coin, Rebbe made the point how a Jew has to feel that without Hashem, you're half a coin. And without another Jew, you're half a coin. You need another Jew, you need Hashem, and by yourself, you're not complete. And sometimes that realization, that feeling, isn't so it's not on the surface necessarily of our reality. The first surface of our reality is a physical, and feeling that we're missing something, that we need Hashem, we need another Jew. It's a bit. Sometimes it could be a bit of a paradigm shift. So I want to share with you a couple of stories to hopefully give us this the sense of the half coin, sense of the connection we have with each other, the connection we have with Hashem, and how one Jew without another is really half a coin. And a Jew without Hashem is half a coin. I want to share with you the Farbrengen with Mendel Futafas, who I'm going to share the Farbrengen as it was shared from him, without any doesn't need to be embellished. He does all the embellishment, but I'm also not going to take away any of the Hasidic flavor and reduce his message either. So give it as he shared it, on the way that only he could. Mendel was speaking about the previous Rebbe's imprisonment and his release. His imprisonment began on the 15th of Sivan in the year Tafresh Pei Zayin, 1927, but the cause of his imprisonment was 1937. No, Zalman? Pei Zayin isn't that 37? It's 37. So, all right.
That was 27.
27. Yehuda says, you got it, Zalman. You got it right. Yehuda knows. Thank you, Yehuda. Good vach, good seeing, good chedesh. So, before the previous Rebbe's imprisonment on Purim Katan, he shared a very powerful discourse and a very powerful Farbrengen, which we spoke about a few months ago. And in that Farbrengen, he basically spoke openly and clearly about how people have to dedicate themselves to educating their children, complete defiance of the KGB and the GPU and all the communistic rules of the Soviet Union at that time. And according to nature, that's what caused his imprisonment, his complete outspoken defiance of the communist regime. That's what led to his subsequent imprisonment. So Mendel Futafas, he spoke about the reaction of the Chassidim and their behavior and how that brought a revolution in the redemption of the previous Rebbe. And it's very similar to the story of Purim, where the Jewish people fasted and prayed, and Hashem brought the salvation for the Jewish people. So Mendel said, you have to understand that the Hasidim were ready to give their lives, everything they had, physically and spiritually, to help the Rebbe. To understand what that means, Mendel said, let me give you an introduction. Let me tell you a little bit about the life as it was growing up, where he grew up in Kharkov. He said there was one Farbrengen on Simchas Torah. There was Simchas Torah, and they had, as Hasidim would and do on Simchas Torah, they celebrate together, and they say L'chaim. And this particular Farbrengen was the all-star team. The greatest Hasidim participated: Ben Shemtiv, Leibel Cohen, Mendel Futafas, Shlomo Shimonovich, Rabbi the Chitrik, and other great Hasidim. And also, there were some older Hasidim. Besides the older yeshiva students like Reb Samach Garevich and Rabbi Enkel Gorkov, there were also some very old Hasidim, some of them who actually saw the third Rebbe of Chabad at Tzemach Tzedek. For example, there was this very old Chassid whose name was Moshe Meir Markovich. He was 102 or 103 at this Farbrengen. There was also Ramat Levinson, was also very, very old at the time. And he also was participating together with the leader of the Farbrengen, whose name was Reb Itcha the Masmid, Reb Itcha the Studious, Reb Itcha, who used every moment of his life in service of Hashem. So Reb Itcha began the Farbrengen. He was unique. They say about Reb Itcha that he was in the level of the Hasidim of the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Bilal Parcha. So Reb Itcha said he wanted to apparently encourage everyone to study Hasidus, and he did it in his style. He got together, he made a Jewish court together with the eldest Hasidim, Rabbi Markovich and Rabbi Levinson, and he said, we're making a Jewish court, and the court has made a ruling. And the ruling is this: everyone who is present has to come at 6 o'clock in the morning every day to study Hasidus, and whoever doesn't come, Achman al-Tzana, Hashem preserve us, they will not survive the year. Pretty intense, right? So that's what they all heard, and these guys worked very hard. In those days in Soviet Russia, to be able to earn a living was really difficult, and they worked really hard. But the Hasidim really trembled hearing the words of Itcha the Masmid, and so hearing the words from him were like hearing words from the Rebbe. They took it very serious. So they started coming every morning to learn Chassidus 6 o'clock in the morning, and they managed. Rabbi Itcha the Masmid, he gave the class, and Rabbi Itcha, the Mendel said, was someone who was gifted with both love and reverence of Hashem. There are people who have reverence for Hashem, they don't have love of Hashem. Some have love of Hashem, they don't have reverence for Hashem. Rabbi Itcha uniquely had both love and reverence for Hashem, and when he shared the Chassidus, it really made an effect on people. And throughout the winter, they finished the entire book of Torah or of the Alter Rebbe. And in the summertime, they finished the book of Likutei Torah of the Alter Rebbe. And after they studied the Torah portion of the week, according to Chassidus from the Alter Rebbe, they also studied a chapter of Tanya every day together. And whenever Rabbi Itcha had to leave, whatever reason, so the class was taken over by Rabbi Avram Baruch Pevsner, who was also a tremendous Torah scholar and Chassid. So this continued for a long time. And one of the Chassidim who attended this class, his name was Rabbi Yeshua Elia Volosov. Rabbi Yeshua Elia, he was a very successful Torah reader. He was a Baal Koreh. And the week before Purim, they're sitting together. They're studying Likutei Torah. And the Alter Rebbe has a line in his Maimer talking about the sacrifice to Jewish people in this time, the story of Purim. And the line is this: although the Jewish people could have gotten out of the decree by saying, we're not Jewish, not one Jew thought for a moment to reject their Judaism. That's what Rabbi Itcha said. So Rabbi Yeshua Elia, he wasn't considered one of the more intellectuals of the group, but he came every morning, he listened very carefully, and he understood more than the others. And Mendel said Rabbi Yeshua Elia was a fire dika chassid. He was a person, Mendel said, of someone of b'chol avav chol nafshcha me'yidacha. someone who served Hashem with all his heart, with all his soul, and all his might. And hearing Reb Itcha say the words of the Alter Rebbe with such passion, it made an effect on him. And right away, he reacted with excitement. He said, "Wow, the Alter Rebbe read the thoughts of every single Jew in that generation for an entire year, and he knew that no one ever had any other thoughts other than devotion to Hashem for the entire year." That's the kind of environment the Hasidim were living with in the time of the previous Rebbe's arrest. They were living with absolute devotion to Hashem, ready to give their lives, or they actually were giving their lives on a day-to-day basis. And they were ready to give everything for the sake of the previous Rebbe. In the summertime of Tafish Bezayin, Mendel studied together with 300 other students in the city of Neva. And in that town, there were 70 older students. They studied in the higher part of the yeshiva. There were 80 younger students, and they learned in the high school age of the yeshiva. And there were 150 younger boys who studied in the cheder in the day school. A third of the students would have their dinner at the yeshiva didn't have a dormitory or a kitchen. So the boys would go, a third of the boys would go to Rabbi Chaim Moshe Shaikevitz. He was a Hasidic Jew, an honest Jew, and Neveldik a Jew, and the people of Nevel were known to be very wholehearted and full of faith and warmth. So in his courtyard, in his home, he had animals and a little bit of a farm-like atmosphere. And some of the boys would come there. There was a lot of food there, and the boys would pay him to eat by his house, and his children would eat together with the yeshiva students. But there wasn't a lot of place to sit. So it was hard to find your breakfast over there. There was a lot of food, but it's hard to find a place to sit. There was another group of boys who would go to Chaim Mendel. Chaim Mendel hosted the more intelligentim, the boys who are more concerned about their hygiene. And Mendel said, like the boys who come from America to Kor Chabad, and they clearly, by their mannerism, display, contrary to what the previous Rebbe said when he came to America, he said America is not different. These boys, by their behavior, they display that America is different. Anyway, so in the home of Rabbi Chaim Mendel, everybody, it was a nice table, everyone had a spoon and a fork and a napkin. It was organized. And there was a third group of boys who go to the Mumme. Mumme means the ants. That's what they called her. In her house, it wasn't, the food wasn't that great, but it was clean. So every boy got from the yeshiva, they got a stipend from the yeshiva. Everyone got 18 rubles. And what were we supposed to do with 18 rubles? So you use 3 rubles for kvartir. Kvartir means to pay your host to stay in their home. You use 3 rubles to pay where you ate, to pay for your dinner in the place that you ate, in Chaim Mendel's house or wherever. And there were another 12 rubles that you would use to buy other food throughout the month. So sometimes the amount of food, Mendel said, would cost 12 rubles. You needed to use the 12 rubles just for food. Sometimes a little cheaper. And you could get by with spending only 10 or 11 rubles to buy food, and you had another ruble or 2 to buy other small purchases. So Mendel said, he said this story 49 years after 1937, after the previous Rebbe's arrest, and he said it was a lie. What he saw was vivid to him like the day he saw it. The previous Rebbe, when he was arrested, one of the main activists in the previous Rebbe's release was our Rebbe. And the Shiva students were trying to do spiritual things to cause mercy from Hashem, to cause the previous Rebbe to be released. And they were really trying very hard. And when they heard that the previous Rebbe was arrested, that also meant that they were also in danger. So the yeshiva started functioning more underground after the previous Rebbe was arrested. And the very first thing they started to do when they heard the previous Rebbe was arrested was to start saying Tehillim and starting to fast. They made a big meeting, and they decided the meeting that since in order to cause the previous Rebbe's release, to make an effort, the various government channels or whatever, they would need a lot of money, the previous Rebbe's release, so they decided that every one of the yeshiva students should give 16 of their 18 rubles for this cause. And Mendel said, I remember this very clearly. So besides saying Tehillim, the yeshiva students start to fast. So in Nevel, during the summertime, if you want to fast for just the daytime hours begin in Nevel at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the time of dusk of Tes Kachavim is close to midnight. So you're fasting from 3 o'clock in the morning to midnight. So they were all in this state of absolute devotion to save the Rebbe. They continued for 18 days. Mendel said it was really difficult. Mendel said, you have to understand that Hashem gave us special strength to be able to withstand the challenges we had to maintain this regimen of fasting. He said, if it wasn't for us, Mendel said, fasting, where would you guys be today? Would you be putting on tefillin? Would you keep Shabbos? Would you be keeping all of the Torah? Or would you leave your faith, God forbid? Would you say that I have my own strength and my own power, I don't need God, as the communists announce? So Mendel said it was in the merit of the devotion of the Hasidim for this to save the Rebbe that the salvation came. So the previous Rebbe writes in his diary of his arrest that there were 2 people that came to arrest him, 2 Jews from the Jewish arm of the KGB, the Evsektia, and their names were Lulav and Nachmanson. So the father of Nachmanson lived in Nevel. He was one of the elder Hasidim, and he studied Hasidus from Rabbi Zalman. Guess who studied Hasidus by? Guess who Nachmanson's father learned Hasidus from? Zalman Moshe. He learned from Zalman Moshe, and when the Hasidim heard that the previous Rebbe was arrested, they didn't know if the Rebbe was even still alive in this world. So all the Hasidim turned to Nachmanson's father, and not just all the Hasidim, but also their leader, their mashpia, their spiritual mentor, Rabbi Zalman Moshe. And Rabbi Zalman Moshe commanded him, you got to go to Leningrad, you got to meet your son, and you need to find out what's going on with the Rebbe. The Rebbe's in prison, the Shbalerka. Is Rebbe alive? By the way, Mendel said, 20 years later, I sat in prison, and I discovered that my prison cell was the same prison cell as the Rebbe. The Rebbe was in cell number 160, and Mendel said I was merited to be in exactly the same cell as the Rebbe, 160. So when Nachmanson asked his father to meet, when Nachmanson was asked when Nachmanson's father was asked by the Hasidim to go meet his son, he said, I can't do it. I'm not in touch with my son. It's dangerous. But the Hasidim put a lot of pressure on him. And the end is he agreed. He went to Leningrad, although he really didn't want to. And while he was in Leningrad, he managed to somehow, in a roundabout way, to communicate to his son that he wanted to meet him. And he wanted to know if the Rebbe is still alive. So since the son still had some positive feelings to his father, he agreed to meet him secretly in some park, because he couldn't show openly, this Nachmanson couldn't show openly that he had a relationship with his father. Therefore, they met in the park. On the day that they met, that they agreed to meet, the exact time they agreed to meet in the park, Nachmanson's father was sitting in the middle of the park on a bench, and his son passed by, and he said under his breath, as if he's not talking to anybody, he said 2 words: Er left, he is alive. When the father came back to Nevel and he told everyone this news, everyone was so happy to hear the news that Rebbe is alive. So Mendel said it was the middle of the night, the 3rd of Tammuz, Tafish Bezayin, 1937. The Mendel said I was staying in again, there's no dormitory, but I was staying in a home with 6 other boys. All of the boys, Mendel said, of these 6, Mendel said, they're all in the world of truth, and only I remain in the world of falsehood. So the place we stayed at belonged to a man named Rabbi Yamin Lippin. In Rabbi Yamin Lippin's house, these hospitality rooms. He had two hospitality rooms. He had one big room and there's one small room. There were two older boys in the small room. In the big room, there were four younger boys. So at 1 o'clock in the morning, they hear a loud rap bang on the window. It was so, the guy was banging the window so strongly that the window broke. The guy who banged in the window was a boy who had joined the yeshiva in Mendel, but he came from Poland. He's a very excitable character. So so he ran to this home. He banged in the window. He broke the window, and everyone was sleeping. And he screamed, "The Rebbe has left imprisonment. The Rebbe is out of jail." Everyone jumped up, got out of bed, and they ran outside. And they saw on all the streets of Mendel, there's a huge joy. People were dancing in the street. People were drinking and saying l'chaim. They were drinking and drinking. They were doing somersault in the streets of Mendel. So Mendel Futterfas said, I went into the shul, which was called the Small Minyan. In this shul called the Small Minyan, there was a Farbrengen. And of Zalman Moshe, he was sitting next to the Aron Kodesh. And he was Farbrengen. And he was completely drank too much. And Mendel said, he was sitting in Farbrengen, he was talking about what a Rebbe is, what a Chassid is, and the meaning of a connection of a Rebbe and a Chassid. And in the end, he said how beautiful it is to see the sight of the soul reaching absolute yearning to be close to godliness. How beautiful it is, Moshe said, to see a neshama, to see a soul in a state of absolute yearning to be close to Hashem. So Mendel said, you think Reb Zalman Moshe would say just fantasies? No, Zalman Moshe wasn't a liar. He couldn't say fantasies. He would say only what was really in his soul, what he really felt for absolute truth. That's what he said. So he sat and he said l'chaim and he Farbrengen throughout the night. Mendel says Zalman Moshe was not able to say a lie, to bluff, to pretend. So when Zalman Moshe said that on this day, the 3rd of Tammuz, there's going to be new revelation of the teachings of Hasidus in the world in a way that's infinite. Zalman Moshe said, now the Hasidus will shine in the world in an infinite way. He really felt, as Mendel said, in his soul, because the Rebbe was free from prison, this is what's going to happen. So when 4 o'clock in the morning arrives, Rosie hasn't turned the sound off. When 4 o'clock in the morning arrives, Zalman Moshe was already deep, drank so much, and the door opened to the shul, and people came to do the first earliest minyan, the earliest time to pray. 4 o'clock in the morning, people came to pray, and before they prayed, they would say Tehillim. They say Tehillim together. So the first group of people that would come to pray in the synagogue, they come to the synagogue to do their morning prayers, and Zalman Moshe is still in the middle of the Farbrengen. But when they walked in, it was like frightening to them. The whole synagogue was dirty. They danced so much. Mendel said in the synagogue was a wooden floor, and it was built on wooden beams. And they danced so much that they broke through the floor and they broke through the beams, so that the floor started to shake. And the Aron Kodesh, the ark, also, which was made out of wood, also was almost about to fall. They had to hold up the ark so it shouldn't fall. So during this whole tumult, as Zalman Moshe continues to Farbrengen and to sing and to dance, and he loved to sing his favorite song, Ashereinu Matei Chalkeinu. How fortunate we are! How good is our portion? That was his favorite song. Even once when he fell downstairs, continued to sing this song. And in the end, when he was too tired from all the singing and all the drinking and all the Farbrengen, he had no strength to continue. So Reb Zalman Moshe was taken to the home of the Chassid Mendel Aklinsky. On the way there, Reb Zalman Moshe said, I have to go and to dip in the mikveh. Which mikveh? There was some mud, it's muddy next to the road. You have to dip into the mikveh. You have to dip into the mud. So he dives into the mud, and it's full of mud. And then he even does a somersault in the mud. He was very tall and very broad. It was very difficult, Mendel said, to get him out of the mud. And then he comes out of the mud. What was he doing? He continues to sing, Ashreinu mateit chalkeinu. How fortunate we are. How good is our portion. And they cleaned him up and they brought him home. So after the Hasidim danced and sang all night, the next morning they got the news that the Rebbe is not fully free from prison. The story that he's free is not true. The Rebbe was sent to a long exile in the city of Kashrama, and no one knows when that exile will finish. So that they got this news at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning, and when they got this, all the Hasidim will suddenly return to this melancholy atmosphere they had before. So at that time, Mendel said the whole city was divided. Everyone in the city was on one side, and Zalman Moshe was on the other side. Everyone was down, and Zalman Moshe said, "It's not true. It's a lie. The Rebbe is free." No one knew how he had the confidence to say this, but Reb Zalman Moshe was absolutely clear that the Rebbe is freed. And the fact is, though, that unlike all the other Hasidim who were so down, Reb Zalman Moshe was confident the Rebbe is free. The Rebbe is free and continued to celebrate and to dance and to say L'chaim. And in all the days from the 3rd of Tammuz till the 12th of Tammuz, he was celebrating until after a few days later, on the 12th of Tammuz, they all got the news that indeed the Rebbe was free from prison. So that day, the 3rd of Tammuz, Mendel said, that is a day of the victory of goodness and holiness against the opposite of holiness. And Mendel said, Mendel was sharing this Farbrengen 49 years after the previous Rebbe's release. And he said, every year on this day, there's a new light that returns to the world, a higher light that comes to the world that gives us the power to overcome the opposite of holiness. So Mendel, one more thing from this Farbrengen. Mendel said that in Nevel, there was a Mendel said in Nevel there was a chassid and a michal de Malamed, and Mendel said, I don't know if a michal managed to meet the 3rd Rebbe of Chabad, Tzemach Tzedek, but he was very old. He certainly saw the Rebbe Rashab, he certainly saw the Rebbe Marash, and Mendel said it was very hard to leave the yeshiva because the mashgiach, the one who was in charge of making sure the boys were at the yeshiva, Reb Chatzah Feigen, was very careful to make sure that every boy was at the yeshiva at the appropriate time. So Mendel really wanted to leave the yeshiva and to see this chassid. He was so enamored by this older chassid. He wanted to learn from him and speak to him, but there's no time. But he found out that there was a possibility to see him on Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon, the yeshivas weren't so strict on everyone being there, and he escaped and he ran out, and he managed to go see him. Mendel said in the Nevel there was a neighborhood on the other side, on one side of the city that they called America. It was about 3 kilometers away from the rest of the city. And then they had on the other side of Nevel, there's another neighbor, they called it Emor. Anyways, every morning at 7:15, they had to come study Chassidus till 9:15. They had 2 hours every morning they studied Chassidus together. Then they would pray together, and they would continue learning until 11 o'clock at night. So they continued to learn until 11 o'clock at night. So there was no time to go and see him. But Mendel said on Friday afternoon, I managed to go over there. Friday morning, he knew where Reb Michal davened, and he would go. Reb Michal would go to study in a minyan called Leibkes Minyan, and he would go from his home three kilometers away to pray in this minyan in the center of the town. And so Reb Mendel got there early, and he managed to see Reb Michal. Reb Michal was sitting in the corner there praying, and Reb Michal finished praying, and then he put on a Binu Tam, and Mendel was waiting for him to finish, but then he finished, and Mendel didn't notice, and he left, and Mendel ran after him, calls him Reb Michal, Reb Michal. And Mendel said, look at this. This guy was an older man, but when he saw this young little boy running after him, he ran to meet him, Mendel said. That's just the type of person he was. A young heart, a good-hearted person. So he runs to the Mendel. What do you need? What do you need? So Mendel said, I heard that you have writings. You have writings of the Rebbes. Can I see your writings? Reb Michal had a beautiful handwriting. And indeed, he had writings from the various Rebbeim. And one thing that Mendel shared that he saw in Reb Michal's writing was a teaching that he learned from the Chudush Harim, the Ger Rebbe. Two teachings. The first teaching is, it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, Im loy achshav emosai. If not now, when? So the Chudush Harim said, you'll never get back to now. If not now, when? You may tomorrow, you have another time to do things that you have to do tomorrow. But the now, you'll never get back. The now, you never get back. If you're thinking to do things tomorrow, you're not going to get back to now. Now you have now. Tomorrow you have tomorrow. You'll never get back to now. The second teaching he wrote there is, you're not allowed to think on Yom Kippur about the sins that you've done. Sins are mud, and mud is dirty. And you move over here, you move over there, but mud stays. On Yom Kippur, to think only about the king, only about Hashem. Hashem brought your soul into a body. And how all of the worlds, the higher angels and lower angels, all the worlds are jealous of you. That because no one else is able to fulfill Hashem's intent in creation, like the world, the home for Hashem, except for you, a soul in the body. That's what you're supposed to think about in Yom Kippur. Instead of thinking about the mud, think about the mission of your soul, and automatically, the Chudush Harim said the mud will go away. And that's the this Farbrengen with the Mendel Futterfass, and powerful picture of the Hasidim in those times, and gives us a little insight to this idea of how they felt and how they functioned, and hopefully we should take the inspiration of the Shabbos to realize the truth that each of us, we're half a coin. We'll need each other. We're half a coin without Hashem, and we should merit to see the coming Mashiach immediately and become Meshekel HaKodesh, the marriage of Hashem, the Jewish people, the coming Mashiach, when we'll become whole in the manifest revelation of Hashem in the physical world. L'chaim. Any questions or comments?
Yes, Rabbi Levin, Shalom Aleichem, Shavua Tov. You mentioned Rabbi Mendel Futterfass humorously, or mentioned that was it not for the fasting and the Tehillim saying and the all the great efforts of the Chassidim, they would not have the Rebbe. And I wanted to ask you, is this something similar to the idea that I heard that although the Rabbeim are, unbelievably holy neshamas, which are gigantic neshamas, in some ways the Hasidim, in some ways, or this, I'll just say it the way I heard it, and you correct it. In some ways, the Hasidim deserve as much. Again, I'm saying it the way I heard it. You corrected as much credit as the Rebbes, because the Rebbes spoke to Hashem, kind of like panim el panim, and they didn't. Whereas the Hasidim, they didn't have such a close connection to Hashem, so it was like on their part, it's just such a. They deserve the way I heard it, a lot of credit, as much as the Rebbeim, or the way I heard it, as the Rebbes, because they had again direct revelation from Hashem, and they could talk to Hashem and be overwhelmed by His presence. whereas the Hasidim, they didn't have that connection to Hashem. So your comments on that. So basically, what Rabbi Mendel Futterfall says humorously, basically, is that a good portion of truth to it, and your comments on that, please.
Rabbi Mendel said that if not for the sacrifice of the Chassidim in those days, we wouldn't keep Shabbos. We couldn't keep kosher. There's a teaching you reminded me of the Tzemach Tzedek about the half coin. The half coin, the word half in Hebrew, is made of the words machatzis. The center of the word machatzis is letter tzaddik. So two letters ches and yud next to tzaddik stand for chai, which means life. And the two farthest letters from the tzaddik spell the word mace, the opposite of life. So there's something about the connection of a chassid to the Rebbe being so close to the tzaddik that animates the chassid, and something about being distant and not being close that's the opposite. But let's say it this way, Rabbi Yosef. Let's say that the chassid Rebbe relationship is like the two halves of the coin, and where there is a Rebbe, there is chassidim, and the chassidim fulfill the intent of the Rebbe, and fulfill the mission of Hashem in this world. There is different. It says in Tanya chapter 27 that Hashem has different kinds of delicacies. When Yitzchak asked Esav to make delicacies for him, the Zohar says that it wasn't just Yitzchak talking to Esav, it was Hashem talking to Jewish people. And the different kinds of delicacies that Hashem wants. It says delicacies in the plural. There are delicacies that are made from sweet food, and delicacies made from sharp, vinegary foods, but they're seasoned so well that they become a pleasurable delicacy. There's a pleasure Hashem has, delicacy he has from tzaddikim and from children and from purity. And then there's another, it says delicacies in the plural. The Hashem has a special pleasure when a Jew resists temptation, a Jew fights with the darkness in himself, and does the right thing. So there is different kinds of different roles that every Jew has in fulfilling this mission of Hashem. Everyone's needed. Everyone has their role. But the bottom line is that the Chassid and the Rebbe are two halves of a coin, and the connection is what makes us whole. L'chaim, l'chaim, v'racha. Good luck.
Rabbi Levin, one last question from me.
I don't believe it's the last question, but we'll try.
Okay. Rabbi Levin, if I understood you correctly in today's speech, if you can correct me, there was something that you said that it was Hashgacha Pratis that the Rebbe's last public gathering was on Parashas Vayakel, which deals with making Dira B'Tachtonim, the Mishkan, the Dira B'Tachtonim, and the Rebbe, and with the Parashas Vayakel telling us that we all need to gather together, and the Parashas Shekalim that we're each incomplete without the other. That basically to make a Dira B'Tachtonim, the Mishkan dwelling place for Hashem, it's Hashgacha Pratis that it felt that we need unity of the entire Jewish people with with each other, and with Vayakel and Shekalim. Did I understand you correctly?
Okay, because I love you so much, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I spoke about this morning.
Okay, thank you.
The Rebbe's father
and also
was incarcerated in Soviet Russia, and he was sent in exile to a place called Chile. In Chile, it was very harsh conditions, and his wife, Rabbi Chana, joined him in Chile. And it was Friday morning, and they had no food for Shabbos aside from a piece of black bread. And so it was a melancholy mood because there was no food for Shabbos, and Rabbi Chana was hoping to get some food to celebrate Shabbos, but they couldn't find any food. But Shabbos was coming, and all have this one piece of black bread. And they didn't have really a place to stay. They had a room in someone else's house. They didn't even have a table even. But she tried to make it as festive as possible. And she put a tablecloth on something that was like a table. And her husband, her saintly husband, Levi Yitzchak, he put on his Shabbos clothing. And he was pacing back and forth in the room. And he was saying a passage in the Talmud. The Talmud says that the Roman Emperor Antoninus had a deep respect for Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, and he once ate at Rabbi Yehuda Anasi's home. And because he enjoyed the food so much, he asked Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, "Can you please give him the royal chefs the recipe for the cholent that I had in your home?" So of course he obliged, but Antoninus tasted the cholent and it wasn't the same cholent. So he came back to Rabbi Yehuda Anasi and said to him, "Where's the beef, man? How come it doesn't taste the same?" So Rabbi Yehuda Anasi said, "Yesh tavshel echa v'Shabbos shmai." There is one delicacy and it's called Shabbos. The reason why it doesn't taste the same is not because the ingredients weren't there. The ingredients were all there. I told you whatever I have. But Shabbos itself makes things taste different. So that's what Rabbi Yitzchak said. He was saying this, pacing back and forth, singing a song, saying this as like a song to himself. And his face was changing colors. Yes, there's one delicacy and its name is Shabbos. So this teaching, to me, is very relevant to what this Torah portion is about. This Torah portion, Vayakel, is about gathering everything together in your life and thinking about who it's for. Looking at all the things you are in your life and thinking, who is it all for? In this country and this city, we're very busy with the details, with the what's, with the how's. What are we going to have for dinner on Friday night? How are we going to get it? So we're very busy. We go to Glatt Mart, we go to Livonia Mart, we go to Pico Glatt, and we go to Ralph's, and we go and we buy, and we're like on conveyor belts, buying stuff, going and doing. But we never stop and think why we're doing it. What makes a person stop and ask why? What makes you stop and ask why? So I think Rabbi Yitzchak, having one piece of black bread for Shabbos, that's a moment you ask what it's about. Even on the level of a tzaddik asking that question. But even for us on a simple level, can you imagine if you only have a piece of black bread for Shabbos, you're thinking this is about Shabbos. This is special because it's Shabbos. So the half coin message is that every one of us has to feel, we have to ask why, we have to ask for who. We have to think that whatever we're doing by ourselves, we're really only half a coin. And without another Jew, we're missing something. So what makes a person feel that everything belongs to Hashem, everything has to be given to Hashem? What makes a person have the drive to give it all to Hashem? Is by realizing and thinking to himself, I'm only half a coin. I'm missing something myself. I'm not complete myself. When I feel complete and whole, then I feel complacent. And I don't give my all. What makes us vayakel, what makes us give ourselves over to Hashem completely, it's by feeling that you're missing something. When you feel you're missing something, then you give yourself over completely. If there was this school board that was deliberating whether or not to get a new bus or what kind of bus they should get for students of their school, and they told the Rebbe different options, and the Rebbe asked them, why don't they consider getting a new bus? And they said it's too expensive. And the Rebbe said, if I heard the story, if you were to realize that the children deserve a new bus, you would find the funds. So if you start with why, you're doing it, then your how and your what is different. If you realize that you're a half a coin and you need the Eibishter and Hashem matters to you, that another Jew matters to you, then the way you give to the other Jew is with a full heart, you go all the way. And this is the message of the Farbrengen. We have to realize we're half a coin. We have to realize that there's only a piece of black bread, meaning spiritually, that we don't have it all figured out. That we need each other. And you realize we need each other. The way we give to each other, the way we give to Hashem, is vayakel. It's with a full devotion. So I was trying to share this Farbrengen of Mendel Futafas just to to open our ears a little bit to the concept we Chassidim felt in those days, with a real devotion, a real sense of connection to the Rebbe. We should internalize just a little bit of that. That's where I was going. All right.
Vayakel is half a parsha, just letting you know. So Vayakel is half a parsha. It's Vayakel Pkude. We split them in two.
So the point of splitting it in half exactly is to say this. There is a Torah portion we're heading to Napakude, which is looking at the details. That's this coming week. What are the details about? But this Shabbos we just came from is Vayakel. What is it all for? Once you have the why, the way you go to the how and the what this week is different. If you go with a very strong why of this past Shabbos, the way you approach the what and the how is different. If you have an important guest for Shabbos, let's say, then your how and the what of you preparing for Shabbos is different. If you know who you're working for, if you feel like you're half a coin, the way you give, the way you do, is the how and the what, the pekude, the details, is very, very different. So that's the message of the Shabbos, to start with why, to stop and ask who it's for, to realize you're half a coin. And then you come to pekude, your how and your what, and the way you do go about it, it's with new kind of energy. All right. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And lots of says.
Amen.
Like it says in this week's the Parsha, Sheish, we can read it as
Oh,
says.
you know, Michal David, one more thing I wanted to share with you before I let you guys go. Today was a yard site of a great chassid. His name was Moshe Rubin. Moshe Rubin said a powerful teaching of the opening verse of this week's Torah portion. Moshe gathers Jewish people together and he says to them, this is what Hashem commands. Said Moshe Rubin, what does Hashem command? This, gathering together, what we're doing right now, gathering together. This is what Hashem commands. He gathers them together and says, this is what Hashem commands. Not the next verses, about the tabernacle, about the Shabbos, that's something else. This is what Hashem commands. Hashem wants us to get together. We got to get together. That's the main thing. Get together and feel and connect to each other. That's what it's about. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim, 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 l'chaim,